Wednesday. So we have Friday off for the holiday. Starting next Wednesday, start the stream at 7:30. That door is going to close, so that way the train can leave the station. Again, if you're running late, no big deal. You got the live stream. You could watch it from the computer lab, your phone, your device. But interrupting me, I know it's nothing personal, but for my brain, the way my brain works, like I really kind of have to start from the beginning. So, no problem. And I'll send out an email tomorrow. All right, where are we at? Bourgeois, my sons would say. We are on moments and torques. And guys, this is just a quick introduction to it. We're going to develop it more when we get into levers and stuff, because it's application of the same thing, just in a different, just looking at the same concepts, just in different ways. So torques and moments. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at something I think most of us are familiar with, whether from our playing days or in our clinic days, and that's just basic manual muscle testing, just manual resistance. This is done commonly, when we're trying to do tests on muscles and kids, just just making sure the neural pathways are there for reaction. There's a lot of 310 on this. I know the arrows could be maybe coded better to see the point, but like external force tries to adduct you because you're testing muscles that are trying to adduct you. What are those muscles? We'll get to them, but who cares? You're trying to adduct, so you're testing abduction pullers, right? Agonists, doing a job. The person, you see, the fact that I know that they're testing bicep, I wouldn't have known how the external force is going if they wouldn't have had bicep, that I'm testing the biceps, because those arrows could have been, is that my muscle pushing, right? So to test the flexion pullers, the person needs to provide an external force that's trying to extend you. I try to extend, and I'm testing externally, I'm trying to extend, internally, I'm trying to flex. I have an extension force, and thus I need flexion forces from my muscles. Who are those flexion pullers? We'll learn about them. But I know it's not just bicep, right? What if I'm doing a test for the brachialis, there's other muscles there. So to just say the bicep, that's just like saying there's one player on the New Orleans Saints. I missed Drew Brees. Triceps. So if I want to test extensors, I need to try to flex them, right? Okay. Here's the point, interossei. Here's the manual test that I want to do right now, okay? So again, I'm giving you the opportunity. And listen, if you're super shy, I think you can, it's a lot easier to feel. Think about this, when you're doing a Brian, try English. When you're doing a manual muscle test on yourself, your body has a way of canceling out and feeling, it's hard to isolate what's happening when it's you trying to do you. Try to tickle yourself, doesn't really affect you. But if someone else comes up to me, does that make sense? Like when you're tickling yourself, it's just kind of like that. But if my sons come up from behind me, I'm tuck and roll, grandpa. Okay, so what I'd like for us to do is get with a neighbor, get with somebody. We're going to do a few, and I'm going to give you instructions to feel the difference of moment and torque, okay? Take a second. Look, I'm not even going to look, right? Just make it magic. Just humor me. Okay. Another thing I want to make sure is that your arms are healthy. If you had a bad arm, use the other arm. And nobody, when we're doing these manuals, don't try to rip out anything. We're just doing this to try to see and feel. The first scenario I'd like for you to do, okay? Elbow on the table. Okay, you got to get up, or if you want to lean. The person who is going to be the demonstratee, right? You have your hand, the person who's going to be doing the manual muscle test, I want you to supply an extension force, but really low to the point, like down here. So in other words, the external force is going to be trying to extend you. So obviously you're going to need to use your flexion force. But I want the person providing the manual muscle test to really try and see if you can extend the person that you're pulling on. Go ahead and do that quick experiment. Low, okay, lower your hand to the arm. Pretty strong, right? Yeah, pretty solid. Pretty solid. Like you can yank. You can be like, I'm giving it all. We're not really trying to extend it very much, right? All right. Next scenario. Let's go midway. Same example. Go midway to the arm. Tell me if that's a little easier or harder when you're trying to provide a manual resistance. All right? That makes sense? All right, now the last one, go to the top of the arm and try to extend them. This should be like cutting butter with a hot knife. Does that make sense? All right, now flip it. Do the same three. Start low, middle, and high. Flip it. And so again, you're like, why was the top one? Go ahead and do it so that you can feel the difference. Now, from the person who's pulling, you should be like, oh, it got easier. From the person who's resisting, you should be like, why in the world did it get tougher? And that's because it wasn't about the force. It was about how far away that force was being applied, and thus there's an amplifier effect. Because torque is force times perpendicular distance. Now, notice that distance is perpendicular and not parallel. If your subject is here and you provide a force down, well, that's not going to try to do anything. A parallel force is only going to try to keep that overall stabilized. All right, and as we know, what can these make? We're not stable. Okay, so perpendicular forces. All right. For those of you watching at home, the first scenario was apply manual resistance down low, in the middle, up high. As you apply it further and further away from the elbow, it gets harder for the person to resist it. It gets easier for the resistor to move it. And it has nothing to do with their force. It has everything to do with their leverage, their moment. It's not about the force, it's about the moment. Okay? All right, example number 2. This is the one that might win you an RC Cola and a moon pie this weekend at your tailgates. Everybody stand up. I need one volunteer who wants to come. Come on. Come on. It'll be fun. Do you have any shoulder problems? All right. So this is what we're going to do. I've seen this. Let's come in the video so you can be world famous. This is going to be streamed on TikToks and Insta Snaps and all those things. I've seen this at a conference. This has happened to me from someone trying to sell holograms back before they got sued, and this was their technique. This was one of the techniques. They were trying. Brian, this is gonna be fun. I promise. Okay, so he wanted me to feel weak at first, like think of it as a control for an experiment. So he said, okay, Brian, arm out, keep that position, balance on your left leg. So do a start step. Okay, great. Now, do not let me push you down. Don't let me push you down. Now you feel how, I mean, just so unstable and just so weak. I winked. Now I'm going to give you this magical pin that has balancing characteristics in it. Hold on to that pin. Now watch. That magic pin balances all of the hibbity-jibbity. And now when I press down, go back and balance on your left leg. Now watch. I'm going to press down. Don't let me push you down. Don't let me push you down. Don't let me push you down. Come on, resist. Look up. All right, balance you up. It makes a big difference having that pin in your hand, huh? Yeah, that's right, my precious. One more time. Balance on your left leg without the pin. Arm out. Don't let me push you down. Don't let me push you down. With the pin. Don't let me push you down. Don't let me push you down. It's crazy. What did I do? Torque. You're thinking that the torque is just to the shoulder, and there's a downward component of that push. True. But what you don't see is this torque is also happening all the way to an axis that's at the left foot. Go back on your left foot. Okay. When the person wants me to be weak, he's going to push down and across. And look how easy that's going to knock her over. When the person wants me to be strong, he's going to push down and into the foot. It's subtle. You almost can't even feel it. No. I changed the torque, but I didn't change where I was applying the force, because it's not about the force. In one, I'm pushing in, and that's not trying to rotate her foot. The other, I'm pushing across, arm out. This is basically what I'm doing, right? Balance on your left leg. That's not hard to knock over, right? Thank you. I've also seen allied health professionals do this. I had to walk out of this before I said something. Shady as heck. And you know what? Sometimes it's not even on purpose. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's our own subconscious. Sometimes when we want things to happen, we'll do things without knowing it. I've had an allied health professional put hands on me to show me something and do a manual muscle test. And when he wanted me to be strong, he applied more pressure closer to my shoulder. And when he wanted me to be weak, he applied more pressure further away from my shoulder. It was subtle, and little changes in distance amplify the torque or the movement, okay? So this is what I want us to do. With a partner, do the stork stand, arm out, push down and more across, and watch how easy they tip over. Then do the exact same experiment where you're pushing down again, but more into the person, more into the foot, and watch how strong they become. Guys, it's not a big change. And that's what I'm trying to teach you, that little changes in distance amplify exponential changes in torque and rotational force, okay? And remember, our muscles can only attach where they attach. So if external torques get greater, our muscles' only choice to compensate is to pull harder. My deltoid can't detach and insert weight there. So as I increase external moment, the only thing my deltoid can do is say, well, I guess it's going to be one of those days. It's got to yank with more force. All right, let's try it. Balance on one leg, manual muscle test with the intent to knock the person over. Knock them over, not making them back. But just make them lose that balance. All right? Down and across. I want you to do it and feel how slight changes in distance can be a huge effect on muscle. Down and across. It's weird, right? Now the other two are pushing out. One is this. That's exactly All right, guys, so this is what I want you to do. Insert, we call it a widget, a gadget, a MacGuffin. Y'all can have a seat. This weekend, I want you to conduct an experiment on a friend or family member. Get creative. Make it a hat. I just made a pin. Just make some MacGuffin that says, did you know when you hold your drink in your left hand, you're stronger than you hold it? I don't know, just whatever. Do the little manual muscle test trick and see if they're like, all right, I need to stop drinking. All right? See what gets you. So the point is that torques aren't just about force. Football, and apologies if there's other sports, I know there are, but like football, it's commonly used about like offensive line play, leverage, using leverage. Khalil Mack, one of the reasons he was such a great edge rusher is he understood physics where, okay, if I'm trying to go through that guy, I got to move all of them at once. But if I just put one hand on his shoulder, now I'm trying to just rotate him. All I got to do is rotate the revolving door and then go through. I don't have to move him. I just have to spin him. All right. Any questions on, guys, these are going to be, I'm asking these on the test. I'm telling you. Same weight, dumbbells don't change, but the moment changes. So therefore, the effort's going to be tougher. Greater, 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 greater. Easier, 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 and easier, and easier. Same weight, right? Like you go to the plate, it's going to be 30 the whole time. It's going to be 40 the whole time. You know, for me, maybe 200. You know. The weight's going to stay the same, but the moment is also going to stay the same because the machine keeps the moment staying the same. Gravity can't redirect its influence. Gravity is not trying to adduct me here, but the machine is. So in other words, external force, you're doing a manual resistance. I'm trying to extend you, your muscles are trying to flex you. With this machine, the machine is trying to adduct me down here, and the machine is trying to adduct me here, and the machine is trying to adduct me here. The machine is trying to adduct me the entire range of motion, so therefore that moment is much more consistent. Now, technically, you know, when you're doing leg extension machine and, you know, the kid roll on your leg, yeah, but that moment changes fraction of what limitations gravity holds. And remember, this class isn't about never do dumbbells. That's ridiculous. There's pros and cons to each. And we offered up some solutions when you're doing, you know, you could apply some manual resistance in certain cases where the force is parallel. Same weight, same force, but the moment changes. True? And again, what I'm hoping you guys get from this class is eventually when you're applying this, you say, well, I've been going to, you know, to working with this patient, we're doing these extension exercises with the cuff, but I know that it's the toughest in this position when there's more torque, and it's the least here when there's no torque. So how could I recruit that muscle in a joint position where there's no external force trying to move it? You got options. You can do manual resistance in the part where there is no moment, or reposition the person so that now there is a moment when you're flexed and there's less and less and less moment when you're extended. Do a few reps one way and then reposition them and do a few reps the other way. That's all I'm trying to introduce to you. Does everybody see how, and maybe I need to word it this way, the external force at her knees is not trying to do the same thing in these two different positions. There's nothing that's trying to flex you here. Make sense? Same weight, same torque, or close enough. That makes sense? All right. Any questions before we keep moving? Remember, I'm only giving you the so what's. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to ask on the test. I'm going to give you the information. And honestly, a lot of this stuff is kind of maybe a little bit more detailed than 310, but it's very simple. We've all had this stuff before. Position. Where are you at? Literally, but in joint motions, muscles influence joint motion through muscle contraction. Your position is going to be, where's your joint at? Is it an anatomical? Is it flexed 5 degrees? Is it extended 10 degrees? Where you at could be an injury mechanism, right? Well, I fell on my arm and my wrist was here. It was there. It was a position. Where are you at? Or in the case of the human body, where is your joint at? So again, that's why we have goniometry, right? Is to not only necessarily measure range of motion, but like when you're doing for clinicians, when you're measuring progress, right? You know, you just had knee replacement surgery. We're trying to get you to have this much flexion or to be flexed by, so every now and then you'll measure and check your progress and see where you're at, right? Position, where are you at? Where's the joint at? The symbol delta is just change. That's all that is. Anytime you see a delta, that just meant change. I started in Lafayette and I went to Lake Charles. What was my change? 65 miles. Okay. And so anytime you just see delta P, delta V, delta, it's just change in. All right, displacement. So remember how in biomechanics we have motion variables, kinematics, we have force variables, kinetics. We talked about different forces. Now we're going to talk about motion. All of our kinematic conversations start from position. How are you going to talk about someone's speed if you didn't know how to measure it? Where are they at? It all starts with where you're at. 40-yard dash means something because I got to know where I'm going to start and I got to know where I'm going to finish. And then we're going to take that change, that delta, and that's going to give us what we call a displacement. Okay, so displacement is just change in position. For our joints, that's, I started out at 180 or 0, it's all kind of relative, and I ended at 90. What was my change? 90 degrees of flexion, 90 degrees of extension. If I'm doing a full range of motion, maybe I go 130 degrees. So displacement is change of position. Think of it like this. Displacement is its own term, but it's made of position terms. It's like what is a cake? Well, a cake is something, but it's made of sugar, flour, right? It has ingredients in it that makes it a cake. Displacement has the ingredients of position change in it. Change of position is displacement. And angular, we can displace in change. Look, there it is. There's my example. Displacement, change of position, change of joint position. All right. We're going to add to the recipe, but I'm going to give you a practical reason why we do it. So let's say anybody run track and field? Or run track and play track and field? I always say run, but we have some throwers. Imagine you get home and you're talking to a family member and you say, oh, I heard you had a track meet. Oh, yeah. What'd you run? I ran the 100. Dude, that's awesome. How did you do? I finished it. All 100 meters. I displaced the heck out of it. Didn't pull up with a hamstring injury or anything. So displacement can only kind of give you so much information. How many people drive in you in a hurry? You can be honest. How many people are like, take my time, I'll get there when I get there. So again, like if you're going from here to Lake Charles, you displace the same, whether you're in a hurry or whether you're taking your time. But we all know there's something different about someone in a hurry and someone taking their time. So that's what's going to be the next point in concept. But if all you did was tell somebody that you displaced, now distances, that could be important. Like if someone said they ran a marathon, you think I care about how much time it took them to run? Like that's incredible. Holy cow, you displaced 24 point some miles. That's insane. But we know that it's not just displacement when we're talking about running a race. How much time did it take you to displace, right? Like, I don't care that you ran 100 miles. What was your time? And think about this for a second. We always report our speed measures in units of time, right? Like, in other words, we know that 100 is a test of speed, but we never say, I average 23 miles an hour. And the reason we don't is because you guys know a heck of a lot more physics than what you give yourself credit for. You understand that every person is all displacing the same. Everybody's displacing 100 meters. So displacement over time, how much time did it take you to displace, is velocity. That's what velocity means. How much time did it take you to displace? Guys, we do this all the time. 45 miles an hour, that's displacement over time. I'm going to displace 45 miles per unit time. Two people run a 40-yard dash. One runs it in 5 flat, the other runs it 4.5. You know darn well the 4.5 was running faster because you know more physics than you give yourself credit for. Because if they're both displacing the same, if the top number is the same, the smaller the bottom number means the bigger overall resultant, right? So if I run it in less time, that means I have to have been going faster. So that's all velocity is, displacement over time. Again, your speedometer tells you all the physics you need to know. In angular world, we also have angular velocities, changes of position. How much time did it take you to change your position? Someone sprinting, they want to change position in a short amount of time. They want to change their direction of their extension. They want to change their direction of their flexion in less time. Because if it takes me more time to put on the brakes and put on the gas, I'm going to be going slow. The last one is acceleration, both linear and angular. Car dealerships give you examples of acceleration all the time. Come to I don't know, what's a car dealership? Y'all, I kind of got caught in the sauce. What's that? Yes, thank you. Sterling, shout out, sponsor this video. Give me a new desk from my office. They say, we've got new 2024 trucks in the lot, 0 to 60 in 4.2, right? So they use these terms. Well, 0 to 60 is a delta, it's a change, but it's not a change in position, it's a change in velocity. But if they just say our cars can go 0 to 60, I'm like, my little rusty Honda Civic can go 0 to 60. What makes your car so special? So they add in another element of time. We already have time involved in speed and velocity. Time's already part of that equation. Time's already an ingredient in that cake. But when they say change in velocity, 0 to 60, how much time did it take me to change that velocity? When you punch the gas, the speedometer changes at a rapid rate in less time, but when you gradually press the gas, it changes over a lot of time. You feel this concept called acceleration. When you change velocity in a small amount of time, you feel it, slamming on your brakes in your car. When you gradually slow down, you don't feel it as much. You increase the time. So acceleration is how much time did it take you to change your velocity? That's all it means. How much time did it take you to go from 0 to 60? Or, heaven forbid, the worst kind, how much time did it take you to stop when you're going 60? Slamming on the brakes or unfortunately hitting something? You feel that acceleration. Now, the magic in all this is forces influence motion. Skeletal muscles influence joint motion through muscle contraction. Accelerations, changes in velocity of your joints or of any other object requires forces to do so. And if your acceleration, your change in velocity of your joints or you is high, it's going to take a big force to do it. Kind of common sense. How much time did it take you to change velocity? That's what acceleration is. I think the key thing, guys, is just understanding the difference. And, when we're watching television this weekend, I don't know if any of you guys are, I love football. And so I'm going to watch football all weekend and just fester. It's going to be awesome. But you're going to hear announcers, and it's not their fault, but they're going to use a lot of terms interchangeably. And, this player has speed and power and this and that. And they kind of use things interchangeably. And guys, that's okay. But we need to kind of know what those things really mean. Position of a joint, where is it at? Change in position of a joint, that's angular displacement, that's joint movement. How much time or how fast, how much displacement over time, that's joint velocity, angular velocity. And then how much time did it take it to speed up or slow down? For our joints, guys, where this is really important is slowing down motion, putting on the brake. You never take your car into the shop to change the gas pedal, but you got to change the brakes. Does that make sense? Your muscles get sore. The late onset muscle soreness, that's from braking. Like, I'm not talking like Australian breakdancing. I don't know. Like, that's your muscles putting on the being pulled apart, putting on the brakes in order to change direction. You could rip some stuff up by that. You can have frays in the road when you're putting on the brake. Again, you have to change your brakes regularly because that's where damage occurs, is putting on the brakes for these muscles, okay? How many of you have ever in physics class, remember physics is a prereq for this, not application-wise, just so that we can kind of talk about things that hopefully y'all have had before. Anybody notice in accelerations, it's meters per second squared, right? Now, I don't know about you guys, but I live in America. And meters per second squared just doesn't work in me. For me, it's miles per hour, right? That's what we know. That's what our speedometer says. So I'm going to use these analogies of miles per hour. But meters per second squared, the reason the seconds is squared is because we're using time twice. That's all it is. We have an element of time when velocity equation, But then it's how much time did it take you to change your velocity? So how much time did it take you to change something that already had time in it? So that's where the second squared is. It's just we're using time twice. It's really miles per hour, meters per second. That's all that is. Acceleration, change in velocity in regard to time. Any questions so far? All right. So for our joints, again, like you only have so much range of motion. You can only go east so far before you run out of Interstate 10. You can only go west so far. You've heard me use the road analogy, okay? So for our bodies, it's important to understand it's not necessarily what goes up must come down. It's what speeds up must slow down. We have to stop the motion eventually. We can't, if it keeps moving, that's a bad day. We're going to have some type of injury if the joint keeps moving down a road. Sometimes our roads close or stop. We stop motion because of squishy things like my elbow flexion might be stopped, not just because of muscles, but because my little muscle here might be squishing up against form. My knees are the same way. We kind of have squishy endpoints, but my extensions aren't. Like my endpoint for my knee extension is ligamentous. That's why like sometimes when people hyperextend their knee, they have ligament injuries because it's my ligaments kind of stopping me at the end of the road. Now, we try to get muscles to put on the brakes because we can repair muscles. But sometimes we don't always, especially when we're tired. Think about this. A lot of the mistakes we make, like, I don't know, last night I went to the microwave to put up my milk. That happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's late. You know, you make mistakes when you're tired. It's the same for your body. You've been practicing, you're exhausted, you're tired, and your body was supposed to turn on some muscles to brake. And it's like, oh, I forgot. And all of a sudden those ligaments are like, I usually get help here, but I'm by myself and they can't handle it all. A lot of injuries, strains, tears. I'm not talking like someone fell on top of me, but a lot of no one was around. I've done this move a million times, but on this one I got hurt. There's usually a misfiring somewhere, usually caused by fatigue, especially in little kids. Because their bodies don't have the life experience yet. They're still learning. Okay? All right. What speeds up must slow down. I have this little YouTube video that I really like that also simplifies these terms of position, velocity, acceleration. Guys, all I'm asking you guys to do on the test is know just basic definitions. Position, where are you at? Displacement, change in position. Velocity, how much time did it take you to displace? And acceleration, how much time did it take you to change your velocity? Know the ingredients in the recipes that are displacement, velocity, and acceleration. Don't worry about stuff like, technically, I used to be this way. I'm not this way anymore. Technically, velocity is a vector and speed is a scalar. I don't care. On TV, they'll say speed, they'll say velocity. When you get into grad school, maybe that's important. Don't care. We can use those terms interchangeably, for this class. And then if you go to Auburn, they'll put you in timeout if you make it technical. All right, guys, I'm going to introduce you to the so what of Newton's laws and how it applies to kinetics and kinematics, okay? Introduction. Sir Isaac Newton, one of the reasons, and I'm not going to go into great depth, just introducing you to this because it's my favorite part of class, and Newton's really cool. One of the reasons Newton kind of came up with all this stuff because he was in isolation during the plague. So like it was like isolate, go home, and just he couldn't play Xbox. I mean, he couldn't play Fortnite. So he was isolated in his rich home, and he just had a lot of extra time to think. Now he was a brilliant dude, but sometimes our situations kind of also enhance some of these things. Newton. He would answer questions, but he wouldn't share them with everybody. He just was curious, and he would answer it. So like one time someone said, Isaac, why do planets why isn't it a flat circle? Why is it more of an ellipse in the orbit? That's weird. Why don't they just spin in circles? They knew that back then. And Isaac's like, that's a good question. Be right back. And after a while, he comes back. He's like, here's why, because I had to invent calculus to show that it's like flattened cone things and calculus things. And dude just invented calculus to answer a question. These principles that he came up with weren't for show. In fact, a friend of his like, dude, you got to publish this. Like, this is going to help people, engineers. But he never looked at it as, these are my laws. He was just answering questions. The so what of his observations. The long definition, object at rest stays at rest, object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by some outside force. So again, relationships between forces in motion, right? The nickel definition, the definition that I love is Newton's first law is just a resistance. Objects, anything with mass is going to resist change in its motion. Regardless of if it's speeding up, slowing down, it's going to resist change in its motion. Inertia, that's what that is. Are offensive linemen typically big people or little people? Because they resist more change in their motion, right? Except where I'm from, in Delcon, we got little linemen, because that's what we have. We're French. But we got good, like, horse jockeys, because we have little people. We have a lot of horse jockey Hall of Famers around here. I don't know if you realize that. Walk with me here, peeps. Inertia. An object is going to resist change to its motion, but an object itself cannot change itself. This is what this means. I'm walking around the floor, but it's not me that's moving myself. The floor is moving me. I'm trying to make the floor go back, but the floor's not going anywhere. I get back its force and I come forward. An object cannot move itself. As soon as I leave the ground, I can have the exact same motions, but I'm not going anywhere. I cannot move myself. Now, when I say myself, I'm not saying I can't move my arm or my legs or that stuff, but in terms of my center of mass, I can't move myself internally. So all Newton did was say, hey, objects resist change in their motion. Well, what are they resisting? Other objects, messing with them. Other objects are trying to move you. The floor pushing up on you. Planet Earth pulling down on you. The exercise machine trying to influence you. So that's where Newton's second law came from. This is the most important law that we have because it's the sentence. Muscles influence motion through contraction. Forces influence changes of motion of other objects. But here's the key. This is the so what. Outside forces from other objects have to influence other objects' motion. This water cup, koozie. Is that what they call it? Koozie. That's a Stanley. This Stanley, if you look at it, you say, well, there's not really anything trying to influence that Stanley, but I could pick two things right off the bat. Planet Earth's trying to pull it down, but the desk is also pushing it up, right? But the Stanley itself can't move itself. It's like asking a basketball to spin itself, like something's got to spin it. So that's all the second law is that if an object resists change in its motion, what's trying to change its motion? This first law is a kinematic law. It's a movement law. Objects resist change in their motion. It has nothing to do with forces. We all resist change in our motion. The racket resists change in its motion. Once we get into the second law and we say, well, what's trying to change those objects' motions? Forces. Now that's kinetic. So forces influence motion. And that's what this is. F is equal to ma. That little sum sign, that little Greek sign, that just means we got to take in all the different forces. Well, when you balance a checkbook, you have to take in all the different transactions to see if you made money, lost money, didn't change money. So I can't just look at the Stanley. I love that. I keep saying that all this mess. I can't just look at it and say there's only one thing trying to influence it. because there's more. I have to look at all the things. Okay? The sum of all the different forces acting on an object is directly proportional to that object's mass and the potential acceleration that that object may or may have. Guys, not all forces cause things to speed up or slow down. I could apply an extra force on this table, that doesn't mean it's going to speed up or slow down. Because as I push down harder, the floor just pushes up harder and they cancel each other out. There's no extra. Okay? So second law is just how kinetics influences kinematics. That's all it is. How forces influence motion. For our bodies, how do our muscles influence our motion in the presence of other forces that are involved? Gravity, machines, other people. Like if you're engaged with a lineman, someone's trying to make you do something. All Newton's third law is, and again, I'm trying to walk it down a path of how Newton was thinking, but it's an insult. I'm going to do my best. It's just so simple, yet it's so brilliant, because back then it wasn't obvious. Newton said, okay, if an object is being felt, so let's say kin dot, the kin dot that I use to explain motion, if kin feels the ground pushing up on kin, this is all Newton's third law is. It's impossible for kin to feel the ground pushing up, it's impossible for the ground not to feel kin pushing down. That's Newton's third law. Newton's third law is a force law. Newton's third law is a kinetic law. Newton's third law is just, if I'm grabbing the Stanley, it has to be touching me back. If I'm not touching the floor, how can the floor touch me back? If I hit the floor harder, the floor is going to hit me harder back. That's all it is. My favorite example, when I remember to tell it, is my oldest son now, he's 17, but when he was younger, man, he's a sensitive kid, but he also has a hyper imagination. I was the same way when I was young. And he went through this phase where he was really scared of ghosts. I get it. I was afraid of ghosts too. But I talked with him. I said, well, Trayson, what about the ghosts scares you? He's like, well, I don't want them to come in and take me. I was like, fair enough. What if I close your door? He's like, ghosts could just come right through the door. And I was like, okay, well, why wouldn't the ghost just go right through you and then you don't have to worry about it? He's like, Dad, that's not how ghosts work. He said, ghosts can come in through the door, but they can touch and get you. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. When the ghost touches you, punch him in his ghost face. He's going to respect your aggression. He's going to leave you alone. He's like, you really don't know how ghosts work. The ghost can touch you, but you can't touch the ghost. And I was like, son, that's impossible. How can the ghost physically touch you with you not touching them back? Think about it. I can't grab a hold to my thermos and it not touch me back. We have to feel each other's influence. So Hollywood got it wrong with ghosts, all right? I'm telling you. They can't touch you without you touching them back. Guys, that's all Newton's third law is. That let's apply to sports. For my baseball, softball players, all that's saying is that when you're trying to do work on a ball, that ball's trying to do work on you. If you're trying to do work on a football, that football's trying to do work on you. When you're trying to do work on a defensive lineman, that defensive lineman is trying to do work on you. Y'all are both influencing each other is what I'm trying to say. What really moves a car down the road? It's the road. Because if you've ever been stuck in the mud, you understand that it's not just the tire spinning. The tires are trying to push road back. But a good road, not some of the country roads where I'm from that don't have loose potholes and particles, the road stays still, thus you move about the road, right? But if you're in sand, if you're in mud, well, those tires actually start moving road, right? You start actually slinging stuff in the back. So thus, the mud can't propel you forward. So how I want you to think about it from muscles, okay? When muscles are pulling, we know muscles can only pull. If a muscle is pulling on something, something's got to be trying to pull on it back. There's that action reaction, but it's really not necessarily about motion. That's why I don't like that term, action reaction, because it sounds kinematic-y. Right? I think I said this on Wednesday, like the director says, and action. It infers there's going to be motion. But Newton's third law is not just, it's not about motion, it's about forces. It's about objects having to feel each other. Okay? Another application of this, if you're bench pressing 200 pounds, my hands are feeling the same exact thing as what the barbell is feeling from my hands. And so the weight, the planet Earth can't decide to pull more on the barbell, true? But I can choose to push more or less on the barbell. But either way, if I decide to push more, the barbell is going to push more on me back. I feel it. You know, you feel it. When you go to accelerate it up, it gets squished into your hand greater. Those things have to feel each other more. Last one, and then I'll let you guys free for the weekend. Think about this. If you're doing this weekend, I want you to try to do some either air squats or if you squat. What I want you to take note is, you take the weights off, and even if it's your body weight, the only way you start to go down is by letting off your push on the ground. You have to let off. If you stayed pushing it the same, you would never move. And if you pushed more, you would actually go, you would make yourself go up. You actually have to take some force off. You have to lessen your push on the ground. Thus, the ground lessens its push on you. Thus, you let planet Earth be greater, and that's what speeds you up on the way down. Then at the bottom, you're not going to push less. You just start pushing more. At the bottom is when stuff gets tough. On the bottom, it's when faces start to change, and you start having unworldly experiences. Kelly Clarkson, right? You're pushing more on the bottom because you have to. Gravity can speed you up coming down, but gravity can't put on the brakes down here, and gravity can't put on the gas up there. Your muscles have to do that. And what you're going to learn is your muscles pulling on bones. Bones can push on things. That's why some students have a tough time seeing, well, wait, how are my muscles pulling when I'm pushing on the wall? Well, muscles are pulling at the joint and thus allowing you to push from your hand. Muscles pull on bone. Bone can push on things. Right? Don't get those two things confused. All right? I know that was a lot. Trust me, it's the so what stuff. The stuff that I told you, this is the key important thing. Definitions, just know the difference between this, and other thing. That's the kind of stuff that we're going to have on our test. And I'm going to always try to bring it back to muscles, motion, and eventually contraction. Yeah, have a good weekend, guys. Enjoy the college football season if you celebrate.